Welcome to episode 28 of the Various and Sundry podcast. I am your host, Matt Harmon, joined live from the beautiful campus of Grace College and Theological Seminary by my good friend, my coworker, and the man who may go bankrupt trying to grow grass in his yard, John Sloat.
Doc, what's happening?
Well, I'm back from vacation.
Yeah, how was the beaches of? Well, I guess not the beaches, but
definitely not the beaches of Omaha.
the cornfields of Omaha, Nebraska.
Definitely not the beaches of Omaha. So we had a good time in Omaha. It was good to see family, and a little different just because of the restrictions of COVID. Not a lot of things are open. But one cool thing was, since we were there over the 4th of July weekend, that there's just a culture there of lots of individual people do their own fireworks. So not as much the go to a big show somewhere, but the neighborhood that my family lives in, pretty much almost everybody on their little cul-de-sac bought fireworks, and so we shot them off in the cul-de-sac, and then that was true of like all the different cul-de-sacs in their development. And my family has their deck sits out and looks over a hill, and you could see like in a 180-degree direction in terms of just different fireworks going off from like 9 o'clock at night till like midnight. And we're not talking just little like, $2 ones. We're like, but like almost professional quality. People are dropping thousands of dollars.
Yeah, the mortars with the bangs and the reports.
No,
that's nice. Fun. Yeah, I grew up in a neighborhood like that. That was some fond memories of doing that.
Yeah. So I feel like we need an update on the grass.
Yeah, it's remaining green
through
this drought season that we're in. So this last week, I would say the area got quite a bit of rain, but it avoided my house at all costs. So there was no free water dumped.
Gotcha.
So we have kept the grass alive, and we've gotten some rain in the last couple of days, and so it seems to be doing pretty well. So I'm encouraged as I was looking at it this morning.
Good. Well, as always, you can reach out and connect with us on Twitter at V&S You can email the show, variousandsundrypodcast@gmail.com. And we have a Facebook page. We'd love for you to go ahead and like that, to follow that. And in particular, we have asked for listeners to provide us with content. In particular, asking for content for a Q&A episode.
Mm-hmm.
And we've had some initial responses.
We have 3 or 4 questions.
We need more.
Yeah, we need a few more. We can maybe get a segment out of 3 or 4 questions, but we need more.
Yeah, we just every time we've asked our listeners to step up, they've done it, and so I'm hopeful that by asking them today in this episode,
sternly, yeah,
I wouldn't say sternly. We're asking for your help, listeners. Help us. Help you, I think is kind of the vibe we're going for here.
Yeah, and we haven't had a review in a while either.
Yeah, going on 11 days as of today. We're recording on July 14th.
That's a sad reality, yeah.
Just making the observation. Do with that as you please, listeners. In any case, we are continuing our discussion of gentle and lowly. And we are going to talk at least briefly about chapters 9 through 16, so kind of the middle third of the book. And just you want to start us off in terms of things that caught your attention?
Yeah, more of the same in a good way, I'd say. Just deep reflection on the heart of Christ, what Christ has done for us, and how he has cared for us in a number of ways. I particularly enjoyed his chapter on Christ's advocacy, the beauty of his heart, mercies. All of those were deeply encouraging to me. How about yourself?
Yeah, lots of good stuff. There in chapter 10, I think that he made some helpful observations about when we tend to think about God's glory as a starting point, we often begin with his power. That I think a lot of us, when we think of God's glory, what comes to mind? We think, wow, he is powerful to create. You're standing before the ocean or the Grand Canyon or mountain ranges, and you're like, wow, I'm overwhelmed with the glory of God displayed in his creative power. And yet, I think what that chapter helps to show is that while that is absolutely true, there is an even more profound sense in which when you think about God's glory biblically, it is most deeply rooted in his mercy and his grace and his covenant faithfulness to his people. That is, in many respects, drawn from Exodus 34, 6 through 7, which he then has a whole chapter 16, where he talks about that key passage. And, if you're not, if that's not fresh in your mind, that's the passage where God says to Moses, this is in the context of the golden calf incident, and Moses prays for God to forgive Israel. And in the context of that, Moses says, show me your glory. And God says, okay, I'm going to put you in the cleft of the rock, and I'm going to walk by me. I'm going to walk by you. You can't see my face, but you can see my backside. And then in Exodus 34, God passes by him, and he proclaims his name, the Lord, slow to anger, abounding in loving kindness, showing steadfast love and mercy to thousands of generations, that whole thing. And that ultimately in the context, it's, if you want to know my glory, like, it's God proclaiming his name as the one who is merciful and gracious and slow to anger. And so that's just a beautiful reminder that central to who God is his love, his mercy, his grace, and that is the essence of his glory.
And in that chapter, The Beauty of the Heart of Christ, he does so by looking at one of Jonathan Edwards' sermons about that he preached to the children of his church, which was just a really beautiful picture of who's widely recognized as probably the greatest American philosopher and theologian ever.
Yeah, certainly up there. At least from that period, yeah.
Yeah, certainly from that period, who is preaching to the little children in his church, which was just a stunning picture to think about, and then to think about him teaching on God's heart and
maybe
glory.
Just a little different from children's messages that we might see in churches today. Just maybe
just a smidge.
So it's an endearing picture to think about of Edwards preaching that to children. And I think that, again, it's just striking how comfortably and familiarly, is that a word?
I'm not sure. You're usually the expert on words.
I don't know. How comfortably, that's a word.
Yeah.
How comfortably Dane moves back and forth between Puritans, biblical text, driving home application in the contemporary context. And so I think that's part of what makes the book so compelling, is his seamless ability to move in and out of those and not have it feel clunky, like, okay, I'm going to talk about the Puritans now. Okay, I'm going to talk about the biblical text now. Like, it just feels very seamless.
Well, and it's clear that he has spent not just this book project sitting in the Puritans in Scripture, but many, many years sitting in the Puritans in Scripture, and to be able to weave them together the way he does is really, really quite excellent. And it's fun to read through the fruit of his labor.
Yeah. There's also a chapter in there, it's chapter 12, where he talks about the decline of friendship and Jesus as a friend.
Yeah.
Which I thought was really, really well done. And, maybe that's something that we'll circle back to as a topic at some point in terms of friendship. What does friendship look like? Why is it on the decline? But he starts that chapter by talking about the studies that have been done that show the decline of friendship, and I think that's in particularly true when it comes to male friendships.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
that my own experience resonates with what Dane writes in there in terms of that seems to be on the decline. That the number of men, I think, of my age that I think have a large number of good friends is pretty small. in terms of there's a lot of acquaintances,
Sure.
but in any case, highlighting Jesus as a friend, that in our deepest and darkest areas of life, he remains. He isn't repulsed by that. He is in some sense drawn to it because he wants to show us mercy.
Yeah. Goodness, there's so much good writing on friendship and the way friendship has developed and changed over the years based on we as a society and those different things. But yeah, I think friendship would be a great topic for us to discuss at a later date, which might be worth making note of.
That's what I'm doing right now
Yeah.
because we hate to make these statements on the pod and then forget about it. So it's down. It's in the notes. So well, we did want to touch on before we get to sports, we should mention we did interview
Oh yeah, we did. Yeah,
Dane yesterday,
yesterday. What was yesterday? The 12th,
13th.
13th.
And so had a great conversation with Dane. We are very excited to share that episode, which will be in 2 weeks.
Yeah, 2 weeks.
So that'll be episode 30, I guess.
30.
Yeah. I think the interview went even better than we could have hoped.
Yeah,
Dane
he
is
was
engaging,
so gracious,
passionate, and so if you haven't necessarily been following along with the book, I think if you listen to him talk about it, you're going to want to read it.
Oh,
So-
yeah.
So even if you haven't been following along with us, you're going to want to listen because it's really a great conversation. Okay, so when it comes to the world of sports, John, what's going on?
The last time we recorded was probably a week and a half ago, because we put one in the can because you were going on vacation, right?
Yeah, it was before July 4th. It was like the 3rd or 2nd, maybe?
Yeah. So a lot has gone on.
Yeah.
The NBA has congregated at the bubble, known as Disneyland,
Yes.
and there's some interesting stuff going on there.
There definitely is.
I heard that the NBA supplied guys to disc jockeys, the guys that were spinning records, basically creating a club atmosphere.
Yeah.
And at one
In
of the
connection with a pool party. Basically
Yes.
a pool party, yeah.
and only one person showed up,
It was Dwight
and it was
Howard.
Dwight Howard. And so he is, I think he's 6'11", and he's
Oh, yeah.
huge, and he's the only one
jacked,
that, he's the only one basically at this pool party.
Yeah. And are there not reports of at least one or two incidents of people being smuggled into the bubble?
I've heard of one
Okay.
Of somebody smuggling in a companion of sorts.
Yeah.
So that's interesting. So that's going on right now, and we're about, I think, 2 weeks. They start end of the month for games. Is that right?
30th, I think. July 30th. So a little over 2 weeks away.
Russell Westbrook has tested positive and staying at home at the moment.
Not in the bubble. So he
Not in the
tested
bubble.
positive before he left, and so they're keeping him away until he clears is it 10 days or is it 14? I can't remember.
I want to say 10.
Okay.
But so that's what's going on in the NBA. Baseball, there's a lot going on. We're 10 days from games, from live, real games, which is very exciting. And there's a lot going on with the Mets. First of all, Robinson Cano, our second baseman, has not shown up to camp yet, which speculation is swirling that he has the coronavirus and is quarantining until he can get rid of it. But the other thing that's big with the Mets is that they're selling. And so there are two main bidders, and you're going to love this. One of them is Alex Rodriguez, Jennifer Lopez. There's also a billionaire in there. Travis Kelce,
Tight end for the Chiefs.
and a few other big name sports characters
All right.
in there. The other is a guy who's relatively unknown. His name is Steve Cohen. He's an investment banker, part owner of the Mets already, and he has enough money to outbid them no matter what. So kind of the good money is on him. The only thing that would set it apart is if the ownership of the Mets, the current ownership of the Mets, didn't want to sell to him, which is also reported.
Okay.
But if he goes, oh, that's their offer, I'll give you another $500 million or something like that. That's going to be hard to turn down.
Yeah, those are big dollar signs, and no matter how much you might dislike him, money can talk.
Yeah, his money's still green.
That's right.
You know,
it still spends. It's still good.
and then the other piece of news is your beloved college football seems to be in trouble.
Yeah. It's getting scary in terms of the prospects of a college football season.
So the Ivy League canceled, which
Yep.
really is no big deal.
No.
But the Big Ten was sort of the leader in the clubhouse to say, we're just doing in-conference games.
Correct.
I don't believe the SEC has even announced that at this point.
Yeah, but it's only a matter of time.
Yeah, agreed.
Because, inevitably when we talk about non-conference games, not that they're scheduling Big Ten teams, but I know that Alabama did have a game with USC, and the Pac-12 has already said, we're not doing that.
Yeah.
And so it's just a matter of time before the SEC, all those Power 5 conferences are going to get on the same page with that.
So the question is, do you move football to the spring, or is this just a domino eventually leading to the cancellation of all college football?
That's hard to say. I think the difficulty with moving to spring is the NFL has come out and said, we're not changing the draft from April, which is the traditional window when the NFL draft takes place. And so if you have no football in the fall and you try to play it in the spring, first of all, that gets complicated because of the weather and things like that. But
Sure.
and more I think significant is the fact that what motivation are the elite top-level players who are going out in the draft going to have to play? So a guy like Justin Fields, a guy like Trevor Lawrence, guys that are going to be surefire first-round picks.
Guys that people tune in to see play.
Right.
Yeah.
The sort of financial incentive is very much against them playing, risking injury and such. And so that's going to be difficult to navigate. And, it is concerning, in part because, football is such a physical contact sport. You have even the crowd issues and you've got so many players. So that obviously increases the odds of people catching it, and
so many players and so many coaches come along with football, and so many support staff. I mean, you're
it's
talking
huge.
hundreds of people for a single team.
Yeah, so I'm getting nervous about that. And then who knows what that means for the NFL. But, at some level, too, there's so much money involved, John, that
I know.
I think I saw something where someone said that about 80% of the revenue for the Power 5 conferences comes from football. If you don't have a football season, what does that mean for those athletic departments?
Yeah, it's not good.
For those institutions. I mean, I know at Ohio State, the football program more or less funds the entire athletic program. I think their basketball team makes a little bit of money, but everything else loses money. So all of the sports, rowing, synchronized swimming, gymnastics, wrestling, all those things, those are money losers.
Yeah.
And so the football program covers it because they generate millions of dollars that help fund that.
And the TV money particularly.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So then when you take that away, what happens to those programs? Are you going to see, Stanford already cut 11 programs they announced.
I saw that. Yeah. I was just thinking what school cut it, but it was Stanford. Yeah. That's
So,
the next year is going to be fascinating
money
in the sports world.
Money is such a big factor that you're going to if it's at all feasible to do a football season, it's going to happen at some level.
Yeah.
There's just too much money. And one other sports note, we have to move on, but the Washington
football team
is no longer going to be known as the Redskins.
That's right.
But they have not announced what they're replacing that with, correct?
Yeah, because they were going to announce yesterday, but there were some trademark problems with it. So they're working out the trademark.
I had heard whispers it was the Red Bulls.
The Red Bulls, really? I had heard Red Tails.
Okay.
Which is apparently, from what I understand, the first African-American fighter pilot group.
Okay.
So it's a nod to the military.
Yeah, I don't know. Who knows? But
the Red Bulls, I had not heard that one.
Which, if that's the case, you can understand. Obviously, there's a Red Bull drink. There's a
Sure.
soccer club, I think, that all.
Yeah, the New York Red Bulls. Yeah.
So, That could be wrong. Who knows? That's not confirmed.
If you want to have a good time, go to the Vegas odds and see what the odds are, the gambling odds of what the Washington's name will be. I believe 100 to 1 is the Snowflakes,
Oh gosh, yeah, no chance of that.
which I thought was very funny.
Yeah, I want to know who's putting money down on that. In any case, our main topic for today, in some ways as a follow-up from our 2-part episode on the kingdom of God and social justice, is how to disagree graciously. And so maybe we can start by why is that so difficult in our culture today? Why do you think that's so rare? Because I think we can all readily admit it's rare to see gracious disagreement take place in our public square, on social media, even in personal interactions. Oftentimes it's not that common to see gracious disagreement. So why do you think that is? Why is it so rare?
Sin, the short answer.
Okay.
Right. We all want to be seen as, and we all want to be proven right at some level. We all want to, as Dane would say, be an advocate for ourselves, right?
Yep.
And we want to be able to be seen as right. I think it's modeled for us on the political stage, where everything is modeled as a zero-sum game.
Yes.
And when everything is a zero-sum game, everything is basically zero. Like
Right.
no one's going to get anything.
Right.
But any thoughts on your end? Why is that so difficult?
Yeah, I mean, I think that you've definitely hit on some of the key factors. I think social media in particular has intensified that. I think it started with the 24-hour news cycle, the constant cable news availability, but social media has allowed people to interact in a non-face-to-face manner. And I think all of us would acknowledge that it is far easier to say sharp, biting, potentially even mean or snarky things in a context of social media than it is to do it directly to someone's face. Mm-hmm. And so when you're fed a steady diet of that, where you're able to, by your phone or by your keyboard, to be able to just fire off a snarky comment or some just, very pointed comment about an issue on social media without having to look the other person in the eyes and say those words, that has created this larger environment, I think.
And I think in addition to that, I don't think the social media companies are necessarily helping us disagree better, because when we post something like that, the algorithm within, whether it be Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, will continually feed us more posts like that.
Yeah.
And create, it ends up creating something of a mob, quotes, mentality.
Yeah. And I think that our larger culture, within the political realm in particular, has created this context where you've got the language of it, and then you've got the reality of it, of culture wars. Mm-hmm. Well, if we're at war, then that justifies, harsh measures, right?
Yeah.
There's the difference between a sort of small conflict, versus if we're at war, then load all the weapons.
Yeah.
Blast away. This is war. We have to win.
They have radical views that are going to be harmful to us.
Right. And so the language ratchets up, and the just the increase. It tends to then increase the sort of tribalism, the us versus them, whoever you think the us is versus the them, and it ends up you end up objectifying the opponent, right? You end up, instead of thinking of them as a human being, you think of them as a viewpoint.
Mm-hmm. Something to be defeated, something to
Correct.
be attacked, something to be removed from your path.
Correct. And so I think that when I reflect on these things, there are really kind of two biblical passages that come to mind pretty readily. I'll start with maybe a more obvious one, and that's one of these little hidden gems in Philippians 4:3, where Paul basically says, I exhort Euodia and I exhort Syntyche to agree in the Lord. Mm-hmm. Now, you think, oh, what's the big deal? Well, it's one of the few, if any, places where you have Paul directly calling out people by name. And you have to remember, these letters were read out in the congregation. So imagine these two women sitting there, and the Epaphroditus, who probably read the letter out to the church, is reading the letter, and it's like, oh, it's great, our citizenship is in heaven. And then Paul makes this pivot, and he's like, you two women, knock it off.
Yeah, and now it's recorded for, it's for the Word of God.
Yeah, for eternity.
For eternity. We're going to be reading it.
Yeah,
for
it'll
a
be
long,
fun to
long
meet
time.
Euodia and Syntyche in the new creation and be like,
did you guys agree? What was going on?
what was going on? What were you arguing about? But, there's one of those places. And then Romans 14, where Paul talks about differing perspectives on whether believers should follow the food laws or celebrate specific Jewish calendar festivals and that kind of thing. And he calls for believers to extend grace to one another and to recognize their common bond in the Lord. So those are some of the key passages that come to mind. But what about beyond those things as sort of the foundation, any sort of key principles or things that you think of when we think about how is it that we can grow in disagreeing graciously with those that we encounter?
Yeah, I always think a good rule of thumb is to, and I picked this up from Don Carson and Tim Keller, but be able to articulate your opponent's view in a way that they would say, yes, that's what I think.
Yeah, absolutely.
Because I think oftentimes if we have an opponent we're working with, and we would caricature, we would paint their view in a certain way, which will create a straw man that we can easily defeat.
Yeah.
That's the first one that comes to mind for me. How about yourself?
Well, I've got a story on that one. One of my favorite stories from seminary. I audited a class with Doug Moo on Romans.
Okay.
So he's written, arguably the definitive commentary on Romans
Sure.
in the English language.
One of the tallest Pauline scholars ever.
Yeah, a solid 6'8", 6'8" is probably good. And so I'm auditing a class on Romans, and we are in Romans 9, one of the more debated chapters in terms of Calvinism, Arminianism, free will, predestination, all that. And so in his commentary, Moo takes the more Calvinistic position. And so a student, as we're getting to this discussion, student raises his hand and basically says, I'm paraphrasing, but I can't believe how anyone would actually think the Arminian position is true. And kind of expecting Moo to chime in with the, how can anyone think
to throw
that?
down,
Yeah,
throw down on the
just
Arminians.
sort of join in the let's take the pot shots at the Arminians. And it was the most remarkable, maybe the most remarkable thing, at least the short list that I've seen in a seminary classroom. It's like a switch flipped, and he started articulating the Arminian position and giving arguments for it, scriptural basis, and all these sorts of things. And he was doing it in such a persuasive way that I remember thinking, did he change his mind? did he change his mind from what he wrote in his commentary?
Yeah.
And he went on for like 5 or 7 minutes, just off the top of his head, rolling out these arguments. And then he stopped and said, now, I don't think that's the correct interpretation of Romans 9. But if we're going to disagree with it, we're going to disagree with the best and most accurate presentation of that view before we, trot out a caricature. So essentially, let's be better than that.
Yeah. No, I think that's a great illustration, and I think we see that happen so many times where we're willing to make a caricature of a position just to defeat it.
Yeah, and it's easy and it's lazy. So there's definitely a temptation for that. I'd say another thing that would go a long way towards helping us out in these conversations is to adopt a posture of both humility, meaning that we recognize we could be wrong.
Yeah.
Like a posture of humility that says,
That's such an important statement to make in these conversations.
I'm not God, so I don't have exhaustive knowledge.
Yeah.
And that I think we tend to see that as we think that's going to make us weak if we acknowledge that. But I think, in fact, it doesn't at all. It acknowledges that we are fallen creatures. We have limited knowledge. And we can be very confident that we're right in a position or in a belief. But that doesn't preclude us saying, I could be wrong. And I'm open to hearing what you have to say. And then the sort of related principle to that is pursuing love. And that gets at, that's another image bearer that's talking to me right now. And I would want them to treat me with respect and dignity and to take my words seriously and not to essentially think the best, not the worst. If that's how I'd want to be treated, I should treat the other person. It's the golden rule applied to these conversations, really.
Sure. Yeah, and I think within Pursue Love, I think at times we can label people as having radical views or something like that as a way to not do this, as a reason to not do this. But I would say to constantly reminding ourselves that is an image bearer, and I am called to love them regardless of their views. In this situation, and in love, give them pushback to their views. That's absolutely part of it.
Correct. Yeah, we want to make sure that we're not heard as saying that means that you just don't give any pushback or don't present counter arguments back or counter evidence, but it does mean that you give the other person a fair hearing and try to understand them on their own terms, rather than just caricature or dismiss someone. And I think this is a good place for us to make it clear, like, you and I don't agree on everything.
We agree on quite a bit.
We agree on quite a bit.
But not everything.
And we've had disagreements more in the area of culture and politics. And I know that has been a sharpening experience for me to hear you give me pushback at points if I'll advocate for something or propose a view or a policy or make some sort of statement, and you'll say, well, actually, I think of a recent example. I won't give the specific content, but we had a text exchange last week about a particular issue where there was disagreement. And I found it very helpful. And you, at points, helped to clarify some misunderstandings I had of the issue. And, you heard me out as I expressed concerns about how that issue is being, handled. And I walked away thinking, that was good. I had a better understanding of this now, and I feel like...
Yeah, I thought of the same thing as we were discussing this, that text conversation. That was also very sharpening for me, yeah.
And as a side note, though, I will say, oftentimes those conversations are very difficult to have by text.
Yeah.
Now, I think it can be done between the two of us because we have an established friendship that goes a ways back and is deep. And so even if I read one of your texts and go, huh, what? Like, I'm not going to jump to the worst possible conclusion and then just, unload the cannons on you. like, I can't believe you think that. What are you lost your mind kind of stuff? Like, maybe I've misunderstood John, or, maybe I need to ask another question to clarify what he means by that. So I think, generally speaking, those conversations are far better in person.
Yeah, the only the only pushback I give to that is when we text about those things, it gives me time to think and formulate a good sentence.
That's true. Yeah.
And sometimes in person I can shoot from the hip a little bit more, and that can get a little dicey.
Sure. Yeah, absolutely. So there are definitely advantages to that on the sort of written end, if you want to call it that, with being able to slow down, process your thoughts, try to make them concise and clear. So that is definitely an advantage on that front. But and I do think that that's made our friendship richer.
Agreed.
That we disagree on some of these things, and we're able to talk seriously about them and also joke about it.
Yeah.
We joke about it regularly.
Yeah, we don't need to get into the specifics of how we joke about it, but
Are you noticing the remarkable self-restraint that I'm demonstrating over here?
Yeah, absolutely. Do we want to turn our attention to some resources, or do you have any other practical wisdom suggestions for the podcasters out there?
I was going to throw out a sort of bone to our listeners of if you want to throw out a question related to some of our disagreements, we would consider that.
Yeah,
right?
we consider that. Yeah.
No guarantees we'll answer it, but if you want to formulate a question for our Q&A episode of related to something regarding maybe an area where we disagree, then we'd entertain that. So,
feel free. Yeah.
But I'm ready for resources.
Okay. Do you want to lead us to a couple of them, and then I can do a couple of them as well?
Well, I'll do the first one, and then you can do the last two.
Okay.
Jonathan Haidt. Is that
Haidt? Yeah.
I don't know how to pronounce it. It's Haidt. So it's
Yeah, it's an odd spelling. For
the
sure.
D is silent. Who knows? Welcome to English. He wrote a book called The Righteous Mind: Why Good People Are Divided by Politics and Religion. And from what I understand, the basic premise of the book is that people tend to reach conclusions and positions that they believe primarily based on emotion first, and then they try to marshal reason and evidence to support that, which is part of the reason why it's so difficult to disagree graciously, because we're not starting with reason and evidence and that sort of thing when it comes to formulating positions. And so my good friend who's a prof at Spring Arbor, another school in our athletic conference here at Grace, who we were college roommates, and we disagree on a lot of things. He teaches in their Bible and religion department, and you could go down a lot of issues and say, and basically, Rich thinks this, Matt thinks this, opposite kind of thing. And we just have the most incredible, enjoyable conversations. And so he really highly recommends this book as a way of understanding why people are incapable often of disagreeing graciously.
Yeah, I think the New York Times had that as their best book of 2015. It was quite popular, well worth the read. It's a long book. Jonathan Haidt is a moral psychologist, I believe is how he classifies himself, at the University of Virginia, I believe. And really helpful writer, really, really, really thoughtful. Not a believer by any stretch of the imagination, but we can certainly find areas of agreement here with him.
And I do think, absolutely, it's helpful to point out he's not a believer, but I do think he probably identifies, even though he's coming from a secular perspective, something that's true biblically in terms of how sin and the fall warps our faculties, both at the emotional level and the intellectual level and reason. And even as believers, we still experience the consequences of that, even though God has redeemed us, that the, as theologians call it, the noetic effects of sin continue on.
Yeah, that's a really helpful book. If you're looking for something perhaps a bit shorter and from a more Christian perspective, Richard J. Mouw, that's Mouw, wrote a book in 92 of all times called Uncommon Decency, Christian Civility in an Uncivil World. And then it was republished because I thought it was timely in 2010. And so I think we're due.
Yeah, need to trot that thing back out.
Yeah, I think we're due for another edition. He lays out the Christian case for civility, even going back to he obviously uses a great deal of scripture, but also goes back to Greek philosophy and a number of things to make.
Didn't you have breakfast with him?
I did. Yes. Yes, I was I was at a conference, a random conference. I didn't know a soul there, and they were serving breakfast to everybody at the conference. It was very it was a very interesting conference. Anyway, but I'm sitting there and I strike up a conversation with this guy from a Presbyterian seminary in Texas, and he and I are talking, having a great conversation. And this older gentleman sits down next to us, and we both look at his tag and we go, "That's Rich Mao." That's Rich Mao. And he knew Grace Seminary, and he's like, "Oh, I used to go to Winona Lake for this. I used to love to go to this place." And so we had a great conversation. And he's been somebody that I seek out his books when I can.
Nice. And then that last one you're more familiar with, so I'll let you mention that.
Yeah. So John Stuart Mill is a philosopher, and he's an English philosopher, 1700s, I want to say. And he wrote a book called On Liberty. Well, the second chapter of that book is called All Minus One. And so basically, it's a case for free speech and how to disagree well. And one of the things he says in there is, you could be wrong. No matter what, you could be wrong, which we've already said. So we're philosophers now. But I have there's a free link. Jonathan Haidt actually puts it out, of an illustrated copy of that chapter. Okay. It's 6,000-7,000 words. It's not long. It's a good read, and it's helpful.
All right, we're to our athlete now, episode 28, and we've got a few candidates here. Let's start in the world of the NFL.
Okay.
We've got Marshall Faulk, who started with the Colts, but then really came to prominence when he was traded to the Rams, where he was part of that great Rams team at the end of the 90s, early 2000s, the greatest show on turf.
Yeah, with Kurt Warner. Yep.
And so he was a huge piece of that, very versatile running back. Darrell Green, who was a defensive back for the Redskins and was, for much of his career, considered the fastest man in the NFL. And you got another NFL player for us there?
Curtis Martin, or as I believe Chris Berman would always say, Curtis My Favorite Martin. Played for the Jets and the Patriots for a few years as well.
Okay.
I think he's fourth or fifth on the all-time yards list. Ran in the 90s and early 2000s for the Jets.
Okay. And then from the world of baseball, Bert Blyleven. Do you recognize that name?
I don't.
Okay.
I don't.
He's a pitcher for the Twins.
He pitched
primarily.
for 22 years.
Yeah, not all for the Twins, but he had one of the nastiest curveballs in the major leagues. It wasn't just one of these where it's like, oh, that kind of dropped a little bit. It was like a side to side kind of. It was like unhittable at points when he was on. So, a long career in the majors there. When it comes to Ohio State, we have Chris Beanie Wells. He was a running back for Ohio State from 2006 to 2008. Had a really good career that was hindered by some injuries, and that limited his prospects in the pros.
Yeah,
but
from the Akron area, I believe.
Yeah, big. He's like 6'2", Mack truck of a dude, but surprisingly fast.
Yeah. The only reason I know that is my college roommate was from Akron. I think went to a rival high school of his and was always rooting for him. And I think at one point he had Akron buzzed into the side of his head.
Probably. Well, I think it's safe to say that I'm going to be unable to convince you for a third straight week to name an Ohio State running back as the athlete. So
I'm okay with going with a running back here. We have a couple of good ones on the board.
Yeah. So we can get rid of Darrell Green and Bert Blyleven. And we did not discuss this in advance, so we're going to have to hash this out.
As per our tradition now. Curtis Martin has a bit of my heart. So I have a card with a piece of his jersey in it. So I'm a big Curtis Martin fan, and unless you're going to protest greatly.
Okay. All right. I am willing to defer to you on this one, though. You're good with that, even though he ended up playing some years for the hated New England Patriots.
Well, it was the first couple years of his career, and he repented. and came over with Bill Parcells to
Okay.
the Jets.
All right, so we'll go with Curtis Martin. We'll go with that. So, all right, one thing you liked this week.
So Andrea and I really enjoyed this week. We sat down and watched on her day off. We watched Bohemian Rhapsody. Basically the story of Queen,
Right.
Freddie Mercury. Great movie. I thought the guy who played Freddie Mercury did a really, really good job. And the music was, of course, phenomenal.
Yeah.
So if you enjoy Queen, it's a wonderful movie. Certainly not in the PG realm, but wonderful movie nonetheless.
There's some content there.
Yeah, I mean Freddie Mercury.
Yeah. Enough said.
was some content.
Enough said. Yeah. For me, I finished the book by Roland. I think it's Lazenby. I'm not sure how to pronounce it, but he wrote what is largely considered the kind of the definitive biography of Michael Jordan. It's called Michael Jordan: The Life, and it's like 670 pages. So it's
long.
It is
wow.
long.
Okay.
Yeah. So it was very good, very enjoyable, and it only reinforced my impressions from The Last Dance of thinking, he was the best basketball player I've ever seen, but not a great human being in some ways,
Yeah.
So just, but interesting, So that was my one thing I liked this week. But, well, are we ready to call mission accomplished here?
I think so. Yeah.
Yeah, this one felt especially all over the board in terms of what we discussed, right?
We did 4 or 5 things.
Yeah, gentle and lowly, sports updates, and there was actually stuff to talk about with sports updates, how to disagree graciously. Curtis Martin is our athlete, and then Freddie Mercury of all people popped up.
Freddie
Special
Mercury.
appearance by Freddie Mercury in the podcast today.
Yeah, I've been going on YouTube and watching interviews of Freddie Mercury. He's a fascinating human.
Yeah. So by definition, various and sundry. Mm-hmm. This is who we are, and this is what we do, John.
Yeah, and we do it well.
I'll leave that for our listeners to decide. But hey, if you want to continue to spread the good word about the Various and Sundry podcast and help us take over the world, we would greatly appreciate that. So we're going to call it mission accomplished. And until next time, the Lord bless y'all real good.
Later.